Um, Welcome, everyone. This is the book chat with Laura. My name is Laura Woodward Cavers. I am the reader advisor at New Canaan Library. Book chat is just a year old, and it's just a book recommendation type of coffee chat. You know, everyone's just sipping coffee, and I I have water. I'm already buzzing, but we're changing it up this month. By this time, we are going to we have invited an author to come speak with us, and I thought it was a wonderful platform for authors to new, young, emerging writers to be hosting the book chat and talking about their books. So Emily has been wonderful and has offered to be the guinea pig, as she called herself a little while ago, and I thank her for understanding her role. But let's talk about the book chat. Now I'm going to share my screen with you, and I hope that it don't have a glitch. I was working on a program last night and we had, there. Can everyone see the book chat?
Yes.
Oh, all right. So this is actually a newsletter that I will be sending out to you all this afternoon. It will highlight the books that we talk about, especially The Talented Miss Farwell that Emily has published just recently. I think it was September that it came out. And so this is the book that we're going to be talking about. Emily Gray Tedrowe, welcome to Book Chat. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I mean, what is better on a sort of wintry morning than having coffee and chatting about books? So I'm really delighted to be invited. Thanks.
So this book, I heard about it. I was at a publisher's event and I heard about it, and instantly I recognized its storyline about a woman who becomes obsessed with art and starts to do criminal things, in a sense, to have that art in her possession. And at New Canaan Library, we have a lot of book groups that enjoy the art world and enjoy reading sort of these thriller and mystery types of dual personality type of storylines. And so I instantly thought this would be a great one to start my author talk at Book Chat.
Awesome.
So I want to give a little synopsis of the book. It starts with an Illinois farm family, just a mother, a daughter and a father. Rebecca, who is the main character, is the high school student at the time. She's very astute with numbers and math. The family, unfortunately, is losing the farm, and she and her father are working very hard to try and keep that farm. But that is not what is going to happen. And unfortunately, they do lose the farm. Rebecca stays to take care of her dad, and her dad is infirm and getting older. And she begins to work in the accounting department of the town hall that they live in. The town hall, in the town that they live in. And while she is working there, she sees some accounts that don't match up. She sees some extra money, and she goes to her superiors to say, hey, what am I to do? We have to put this in a certain fund. And they are all, very important people, and they're just, oh no, leave that, put that in such and such fund, put that in such and fund. And all of a sudden she is left with not a huge amount of money, but some money that she's sort of, what am I going to do with this? And so Emily, I'm going to ask you, is this the turning point this is where she then begins the quest, what to do with the money?
Yes, I think you absolutely nailed that sort of inflection point for this young woman who was unable to go to college despite her intelligence and her ambitions and her success. She does stay to take care of her father and the father and their family business on the farm. But when she unexpectedly finds this sort of extra fund of money in the town where the town hall where she works, she happens on that day to be visiting a small art gallery while she's taking her father to a doctor's appointment. And she becomes entranced by a painting on a wall. And this is something that an experience she's never had. She didn't grow up in a family where access to museums was a thing. Her town wasn't particularly well versed in the art world. She's not even sure if she's ever seen a real painting before, but as she stands there, something about this particular piece of art takes hold of her. And then she looks at a little sticker underneath and realizes that the price of this painting is almost identical to the couple $100 that has been sort of left over and is missing at her work. So this is the moment where she takes a step and she crosses over from a sort of good citizen to, this one particular crime. She uses some stolen money and she buys this painting. And she eventually pays back this small sum of stolen money. However, as with most con artists, and I do, think of this as a con artist novel, she can't go back and she can't stop. So what she begins to do is to find more missing funds from her small office workplace and use that to buy more and more art, which she will then occasionally resell to earn a profit and plug that money back in. Although as the novel continues, that gap between what she makes and what she plugs back into the town, or actually what she takes and what she plugs back in, that gap grows bigger and bigger. And that's when that sort of takes place over the course of the novel, as both her crime and her art collecting grow bigger and bigger and more immense.
So that's what I found so intriguing about that moment when she had money in her hand and then she saw the art piece. I thought to myself, my gosh, has she been harboring this art obsession for a while, or was it that she's a very tidy person? Was she mistakenly saying, gee, if I just took care of this, on the books or something, then everything would sort of right itself? It's like, where did the obsession begin and then the criminality begin? I found that sort of a funny, slippery slope there.
Yeah, you're right. I think, to be honest, the obsession with art strikes Becky completely by surprise. I think in one point, I described it when I was writing an essay about this book. I described it sort of, if you've seen the movie Bull Durham, which is a favorite of mine, and I know my mom's, there's a moment where the main character, Bull Durham, describes this sort of genius picture as, it had nothing to do with you. God reached down and turned your right arm into a thunderbolt. And in that way, I like to think that Becky was sort of struck by the lightning of an obsession that she didn't understand. And she's completely in its thrall. In her mind, taking money and using it to buy art isn't hurting anyone necessarily. And it becomes the way that she structures her life. She creates an entire double identity, one persona in the art world where she quickly becomes very well known, and one persona in her small town. She's also very beloved in her small Midwestern town. She's been a model citizen. She never left. She has a ton of talents and does really work hard to keep the community going during tough times. A lot of times, for example, she'll fund something out of her own personal money, which is ill-gotten, of course, but she will, for example, sponsor the Little League team or pay money so that the high school can have a prom that they wouldn't have had. So she builds up this goodwill in the town, yet at the same time, she lives there for 20, 25 years while she's continuously bilking money from its coffers. And then I should also say that this is very loosely inspired by a true story, something that really happened here in Illinois. I don't know if you want me to get into that, Laura, or if that was something we were.
In just a little bit, because I do have like, how did you do your research and stuff, but
Oh, sure.
what I recall and loved in the story when you talked about the drug rush that Becky felt when she had that first painting.
Yes.
And that is sort of, to me, because everything had been so difficult with the losing of the farm and her father ill, that it was really very hard life, that to finally own something that she had this drug rush that she talks about in the book. And she, just became addictive, right then and there. She loved that feeling. So yes, I wanted to ask you about what inspired you to do this kind of story. So yes, go right ahead in.
Well,
And
I'm happy
it's
to
all about
tell
the
you. I
true
mean,
story.
there was a moment I happened to be, so I live in Chicago. I happened to be driving our kids. They were much younger then, so I was carpooling a lot, and I was driving them from one place to the other. And as parents know, you often have the radio on during this time. And I was listening to an NPR report that was some breaking news about, this is in the early 2000s, breaking news about an FBI arrest of a town finance officer in a very small town called Dixon, Illinois. And it was a big sting where the FBI arrested and indicted a woman for allegedly embezzling over $50 million over 20 years from this tiny municipality. It would turn out to be the greatest municipal fraud in US history. So of course I was, interested, surprised, amazed. But the thing that really grabbed me as a writer was when the report went on to note that the FBI had held off on actually arresting this woman for several weeks, even months after they knew they had the evidence that she had committed this crime. Because, as the reporter put it, they didn't believe that a woman alone could commit a crime of such complexity and magnitude. They were essentially looking for her male co-conspirators, of which she had none. So that part grabbed me, and I just thought, gosh, I really want to imagine what it would be like to live that life, to be inside that person's head. How could you sustain a double life like that in a small town? How could you continue to remain chatty with your neighbors, outside, on the walk to, get coffee, or at church? What sort of psychology would it take to kind of create these compartmentalized sections in your mind where you kind of needed to stay in your community and yet still be pulling off this immense crime? So what I did was, actually maybe a little counterintuitive. I stopped following any of the news reports of the actual story as it unfolded. Although, it did make pretty national news. This story, the real woman's name is Rita Crundwell, and there's actually an excellent documentary if you are interested in this story. It's called All the Queen's Horses. So the true story unfolded in the world of horses. The woman was a champion horse breeder, and that's what she used the money for. However, I am not a horse person. I knew I wasn't going to write a horse novel. I stopped following all of the news reports about the actual story because I really wanted to preserve my own imaginative space, right? I didn't want to write an investigative report. I wanted to imagine my own character and set her in the world of high stakes art collecting. So, it was really kind of an interesting tension between, yes, this really happened. I stay very close to the actual numbers. My character embezzled the same amount of money as in the true life crime over the same amount of years from the same type of small town. So the numbers are all the same, and yet the characters and the environment are all completely fictional and made up.
I was wondering when reading it if you had you had a background in art, that you loved art and had come upon this as just something that you had heard, in the industry of art,
Yeah.
or that, you were a numbers person and, this was a great scheme that
I'm laughing because I just saw my mom shake her head when you said, "Are you a numbers person?" My mom was like, "No," because it is very clear in our family from my many math course struggles that I'm not a numbers person. But your question is a good one, and I think that two things. One is that I don't have any visual art background other than just being a fan. I do love to go to museums, and I do love to pop into galleries when walking around New York or Chicago. I also love to read about artists, biographies or magazine interviews. So I would say that I had enough background to be able to write from the perspective of someone who enters the art world as a newbie, which Becky does. So I was able to stand on that same ground with her and maybe kind of learn as she learns. I learned what she needed to learn.
well,
In terms of math, say it again.
I learned two things that I'd like you to just give a little bit more information on.
Sure.
Number one, there is this word called completist.
Yes.
And I had never heard that word before as a person who is a collector.
Yes.
And that they don't get necessarily the great names or the signature type paintings, the ones that everybody sees in the museums. No, the completists are collectors who do it differently. Explain that. I thought that fascinating.
Oh, I'm glad you liked that. I mean, I'm not sure so I'd heard that term completist sort of colloquially. So for example, if someone says, "Oh, I'm a Taylor Swift completist. I listen to all of her albums and outtakes, and I have all of her interviews." Or if someone says, I'm a chocolate chip cookie completist. I try every brand that's out there. I'd heard it colloquially, but I sort of either maybe heard it referred to in the art collecting world, or maybe I made it up. I'm not sure. But the idea is that Becky moves through phases in her collecting. And as she grows and gains mastery over the art that is collecting art, she reaches an end point, almost like a chess game where there's not much to do other than to move, tiny little moves. And in her mind, she wants to keep this obsession fresh and engaging for herself. And so she creates this game where she is going to define the rules of something and then collect to them. So say, for example, she wants to collect every portrait that is black and white, semi-abstract, and only shows one half of a person's face, right? And that's kind of an extreme example, but she can do that. She can create her own sort of a grouping of something and maybe curate that in the way a gallery might, but collect towards it and build her own collection based on those secret private rules.
Well, that might become something that collectors will start to do. If they read your book, they'll say, this is a great idea, to get all just the early sketches, or to, do just, foot renderings or something.
Right,
I don't
right.
know. It's very interesting. You have maybe started a trend.
Perhaps.
The other thing that I found interesting is you had mentioned that Becky was able to actually Reba, I must tell you, the alternate name to this persona is Reba, and that's Reba goes to New York City and quite a glamorous art collector there, very different from her life in Illinois. But she is buying and selling sometimes from museums who store they have a storage of artwork that is not for, being seen, but they will sell it. Is that another thing you found out, is what museums can do with collectors?
So I don't know that I have her buying regularly from museums.
No, it was a one-time
right. Towards
buy.
the end, when she is faced with the one missing piece of a completist situation, right? It is held by a museum. which refuses to give her any information about it. And she sort of, without giving anything away, finds a personal connection as a way to get the authorization of the initial seller to that museum for a resale. And I do believe that happens, but very infrequently. And I think maybe I kind of, made something happen that doesn't necessarily happen all that often in the real world, which is, of course, what fiction is all about. So, no, I don't think I mean, unfortunately, we can't walk into a museum and start shopping, but she was able to finagle it using, I think, that Becky Farwell sort of combination of charm and sheer energy and just wearing people down to get what she wants. Because I think that's her essential characteristic, is she has to get what she wants. It's not a very pretty one, but it definitely defines her.
Yeah, and she had garnered quite a reputation. People were following her for her art advice, and so that's why I thought possibly this was another thing. Collectors who are of her same stature can, do have a relationship with museums if they want to sell a piece or whatever.
Could be.
Anyway, that is how well written and how fun this book is. I really enjoyed those two facts.
Thank you.
So just to tie it all up, I just wondered, is this a story about a compulsive, obsessive kind of a disorder?
Mm.
Or is this, that she's trying to show up her high school friends who actually were kind of mean to her at the beginning of the book? I mean, what do you think?
I think that's a great question. I honestly do believe that there is a lot going on psychologically for this character. And there was a lot of frustrated ambition. And I should say that a lot of this is a lot of Becky's experience in her early years was being sort of held back by a sexist, sort of environment that wouldn't let her, as an ambitious woman, take the steps that she needed to take to become successful. And she sees that both in the farming world and then in the art world. So part of, I think, what's going on for her is there is a lot of anger. There is a lot of frustrated ambition and anger in this very talented woman who isn't able to express it in a lot of sort of okayed opportunities. But, I think to your point about obsessive compulsions, I mentioned, I have Becky read towards the end of the book an article that I have never stopped thinking about, which is a true article, and it appeared in the New Yorker several years ago. It's called The Itch. Maybe some of you remember it. And it's about people who suffer from a sort of a combined physical, neurological, and psychological sense of an itch that never goes away, no matter how much they scratch it. And people do horrible things, scratching through to their brain matter, etc. And it was just the sadness of that really penetrated me. And I sort of gave that to Becky as, sort of this itch that she can't scratch. Nothing that she will ever bring into her life in terms of art is going to be enough for her. And that's why
Wow.
her crime continues. So.
Well, thank you so much for writing this very fun, engaging story.
Oh, thank
I
you.
now want to move on to give brief descriptions of your other two novels, Blue Stars and Commuters, and then we'll listen about some of your book suggestions for.
Sure. Well, yeah, thank you for putting those covers up there. It's like seeing old friends when I see my old novel covers up there. Blue Stars is a novel about the fallout of the Iraq War on American families. It follows the path of two women whose loved ones were seriously injured in the war, and the sort of unlikely friendship they create, these two women, as they're staying at Walter Reed Hospital. So this is a novel that, I think is about the power of women's friendships and the power of women to help their families get through sometimes the worst things. And I also really loved writing this book because it drew on my brother's experience. My brother, my younger brother Malcolm, is a Marine, was a Marine, served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is not about his particular experience, but it was sort of my tribute to being in a military family, and as much of my own family is, and sort of what that means today, what it means to be in our current world of these conflicts. and to live the life of someone who loves somebody who is in harm's way halfway around the world. So that's Blue Stars. And Commuters is my first novel, and it is about a woman who finds love very late in life, and her marriage to someone who is also considered elderly really throws a lot of drama into their two families. And the merging of these two families is not smooth. And I would say this novel, sometimes when people ask me what it's about, I say it's about love and real estate, because they're at the center of this novel is the ownership of a big, beautiful house. So yeah, I guess Commuters is about love and real estate. And that was my very first novel. So
Thank you. I just for everyone to know, these are other read-alikes that I just did a little research through Novelist, to if you're interested in, you know, the art world, or in these these double lives that people lead, or these are just some of the things that Novelist has suggested you would also like to read if you that's just, you know, similar to Talent Miss Farwell, excuse me. So Emily, I asked you to bring some books that you would like to suggest. What are those books?
This I like even more than talking about my own novel, believe it or not. I like to talk about other people's work. So I have to recommend a new novel from, I think, about 4 to 6 months ago. This is called The Boy in the Field by Margot Livesey. And this is a beautiful, short, compressed novel that has that kind of fairy tale quality where it lingers with you. It has a sort of a simple story. One afternoon in 1999 in England, 3 teenagers walk home, and in a field they find a very, very grievously injured boy. And that is the inciting incident of the novel, which then takes off into some really unusual and beautiful sidelines about how this interaction, how this event shapes the teenagers' lives over the course of time. And I just, you know, I think Margot Livesey is an under-known master of fiction. You may know her from other novels like The Flight of Gemma Hardy or The House on Fortune Street. She's, you know, sort of well known in the, I feel like she has that writer's writer moniker, but I just, you know, this novel has gotten some wonderful attention, and the New York Times just recognized it as one of the best books of the year. So I have to just really shout this one out. It's beautiful. Okay, I have 2 more. Is that okay?
That's okay. And then we'll
good.
open up to questions for everyone to ask of you.
Okay, good. So this is a novel by the author Ya Jiasi called Transcendent Kingdom. And I loved this novel. This is a second novel by a woman who grew up in Alabama, but was born in Ghana. Jiasi is how you pronounce her name. So you may know her from her debut novel, Homegoing. That won a lot of awards. This novel is about a PhD candidate in neuroscience at Stanford named Gifty. And Gifty is dealing with a lot of trauma from her upbringing in Ghana, including her brother's addiction. He has a very serious opioid addiction, and her mother's depression. So when I say it like that, it sounds super depressing, but the writing is so absolutely beautiful and clear-eyed, and the character is really really kind of balanced between the religion that she grew up with and her deep belief in science as a scientist. And so, unlike so many novels I read, I found this a very powerful investigation of religion by someone who believes both in science and is a deeply religious person. So that was what grabbed me about this. I can't stop thinking about this novel. So that's one I would definitely recommend. And then, okay, I haven't finished it yet, but I am totally obsessed with this. It's not fiction. This is a nonfiction book called Square Haunting by the writer Francesca Wade. And the subtitle is 5 Writers in London Between the Wars. So this is about the London neighborhood called Mecklenburgh Square. And it's a place that Virginia Woolf, Dorothy Sayers, the poet H.D., the classicist Jane Harrison, and a historian, Eileen Power, all lived, not at the same time, but all between World War I and World War II. So this book is like a group biography. That's a genre I really love. And it's just kind of a beautiful investigation about how these women were shaped by living in London at that time, and the damage from World War I and the fear of, the coming World War II, how that sort of shaped their writing work, their love lives, and their individuality. So it's a really fantastic book. I'm not done with it yet, but I highly recommend it.
Thank you so much for some of those wonderful, wonderful recommendations. I'm now going to open, if anyone has questions, please unmute yourself, and yes, we'll just, I don't know if we have hands here, but just try, let's see. Does anyone have a question at all to ask Emily? Just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away.
It can be a little tricky on Zoom, huh?
I know it is tricky. Sometimes people don't know that they're still on mute. And if you have to unmute yourself, you just bring your cursor to the bottom of your screen and you will see a black bar with all these different icons. If you go way over to the left, you'll see a microphone-like icon. Just click on that and it will take you off mute. I see Barbara Wenzel is taken off mute. Elizabeth Gray.
Well, it's Betsy.
Elizabeth,
And
what question do you have?
I'm going to ask my daughter the first question. Maybe you'll get it going.
Good
So,
idea.
Emily, explain
Yes.
to them that this is also, I think, a novel about friendship. Tell them about Ingrid.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you, Mom. So, yeah, The Talented Miss Farwell is definitely about friendship. And one of the things that Becky does when she stays in the small town is she becomes very close to another young woman who grew up the same time she did, Ingrid. And Ingrid is a nurse and a mother, and is one of Becky's sort of grounding people in amid all of her sort of crazy life crimes. Ingrid knows nothing about what Becky is doing secretly, but Ingrid and Becky are able to bond over the things that they both truly love, like volunteering and going out for drinks and kind of gossiping about people they know in the small town. And it's funny because Ingrid started as kind of a smaller character than she ended up being in the novel. And she really grew on me as a quote unquote, normal person, one of us, like with a real, job and a real family and more mundane struggles than Becky has. And I really loved creating their kind of dynamic together as friends, a friendship that grows over decades. So yeah, Mom, thanks for reminding me about Ingrid. And I've heard from other readers that she's one of their favorite parts of the novel too. So I will say that there's Ingrid is the source of some pain later when it comes to Becky's ending, which I won't give away, but there is some real, emotional fallout that can happen there. So yeah.
Anyone else? Oh, Barbara, I see your hand is up. So
Emily, knowing you, I suspect you're already starting to think about your next book. Are you?
Hi, Mrs. Wenzel. It's good to see you. I have started something new, but I have to say it might just be something that I started for fun. So of course we're in this pandemic and quarantine and things have been very hard. And I was preparing for the publication of this book, which is a kind of work, but it left me with some time that I usually spend on writing something new. And during this quarantine, I really missed that. I really missed working on something new. And I kept thinking, gosh, I wish I was working on this draft. I wish I was writing The Talented Miss Farwell right now. as a way to kind of decompress and take my mind off of all the hardships. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just start something kind of fun and light and summery and maybe like kind of romantic or sexy. Can I say that with my mom on the Zoom chat? And something kind of, you know, very different from what I had normally been working on. So I did start that story. And right now it's just been a pleasure to kind of use it as an escape. And I don't know, Mrs. Wenzel, it might never see the outside of my computer screen, but it is something fun to be working on now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see that Ed has his mic off.
Yeah,
Ed, are you wanting to ask a question?
well, actually, not a question, but a comment. I believe in our town of New Canaan here, we had a similar kind of event where a well-trusted employee of the town kiked lots of money. I mean, it was hundreds of thousands. It wasn't millions, I don't think. Does anybody remember that, or am I?
Hmm.
I think it was the two lunch ladies that worked at the high school were possibly.
Oh, wait a minute. Maybe that's what it was. Thank you.
Yeah,
Uh,
they were working together over years because they were taking cash for the food,
Yep, that's right.
and yeah, nobody was really keeping track of who sold what, and
Yeah, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. I guess that's right. Well, anyhow, that's
Yeah,
my.
that does happen. I mean, maybe more frequently than I had heard of when I started writing this book or when I started being interviewed about it. Now I'm hearing a lot more of these stories from, you know,
Yeah.
from situations. And I think it's because small towns are very, you know, very trusting and, you know, there's
Sure.
usually a great sense of community. There isn't as many controls on the financial situation. I think that's changed a lot now, but unfortunately, there was a lot of opportunity, I think.
Are there any more questions? Does anyone have a question? I'm kind of looking over to see if anyone unmutes themselves. Becky,
I'll
is,
ask her another one,
oh, okay, go right.
because I think you all would be interested in this one. How is this a good way to be on a book tour, Emily?
You know, this is a good way to be on a book tour, Mom. It's like, well, first of all, I have my slippers on. I'm wearing slippers right now instead of uncomfortable high heels. So there's that.
Me too.
Oh, good. I hope we're all in something comfortable. The commute's a lot better. I can just step right out to my kitchen to get coffee and see my kids. And to be honest, there's been a lot more of this kind of really valuable engagement. You know, when you do a regular book tour, you often read to an audience and maybe answer one or two questions and then you go away. But for some reason, this digital interface really allows for maybe a more intimate conversation, more audience participation, which I do love. And, you know, I'm able to kind of get to see you guys in a more up close manner than I would have gotten to. So there are definitely some pros to it, you know.
As a librarian, it's also easier for us. And, you know, and to have book tours and there's the traveling expenses that I really think that though we do miss being with one another and, you know, being together, I have a feeling that this will be a, you know, just how things will be going forward. Once we're all inoculated, I don't think Zoom is going away or this digital style of connection. It's everyone's getting very savvy with it.
Agreed.
And yeah, that's my professional thought on it.
Yeah, I agree.
So, any other questions? So, Emily, is there one last thing you want to say about the book? Just one last, or just one last thing about your experience writing the book, just to cap it?
Only just that I should let you know that, you know, writing this book was such a joy for me. This was, I think, the most fun I've ever had writing a novel. Writing novels can be a long, hard slog of work, but for some reason, like, this character captured my imagination and I just was so happy every day to go to the work and to kind of keep creating her adventures. So if any of that comes through, I'll be delighted. It was just, I can only hope that maybe working on something again will be that much fun for me, but this one really was that. And I'm just so happy to get to talk to you guys about it. So thank you for the opportunity to come here today.
Oh, well, thank you for being the first author for the book chat.
I love
Very
that.
much appreciate this.
Yeah.
And for everyone to know, the slides, it's not really a slideshow, but it's this kind of like little digital newsletter, I will be sending that out to everyone that's registered for this program. It will also have the book suggestions that Emily has
Oh,
given
good.
to me. And so you'll be able to check those out in the Canaan Library. Thank you again, Emily.
Emily,
Thank you,
Thank you so much, everybody.
everyone, for coming. I appreciate your attendance. Everyone have a good holiday.